Chiefs' Week 1 opponent, Lamar Jackson, really struggled against Kansas City. In fact, partly because of that, in his career, including the playoffs, he's only 1-4 against KC, 40 games over 500 against everybody else. Those 4 losses are his most against any single opponent. But Lamar is not concerned about who's on the schedule for Week 1. Take a listen.
I mean, I really don't care who we play. It really didn't matter. At the end of the day, our goal is to make it to the Super Bowl. We lost to them in the playoffs. Just us beating them in the regular season really don't do anything. It just helps us, just keep stacking up wins to hopefully make it to the playoffs, if anything, to try to get in that same position again and hopefully, be successful. But it really don't matter who we play first game. Obviously, it's the Chiefs, but I really didn't care.
Tim, what do you find interesting about his comments?
Yeah. Well, I just think he's right. I agree with his comments, and I think that he's saying the right things. It sounds and seems like he believes it. He's right. Well, whatever happens in terms of the beginning of the season, how you play against Kansas City doesn't matter. I mean, we had the full screen up for a reason, in terms of how they've performed or how he's performed against, Patrick Mahomes-led teams. So I think it's the right approach. Especially when it could potentially not go your way early in the season. And that doesn't mean that it can't go your way later. Look, Hannah, I think you kind of said it. Steve Spagnuolo has done a really good job against that Ravens offense in these matchups. So I think it really comes down to, can you control the game against Kansas City the way that you kind of have a habit of doing against other teams, lesser teams in the National Football League? Because that's ultimately how Lamar is going to be judged. It's how this era of Baltimore Ravens teams is going to be judged, is how they play against the Kansas City Chiefs.
Yeah, and it was so crazy in that title game, Acho. We look at the way Todd Monken called that game, 18% run plays. I mean, we've talked about it again and again. What is it going to take for this Ravens team to knock the Chiefs off their pedestal?
Well, it's got to be Lamar Jackson playing better. It's not necessarily about Todd Monken and how he called the plays. It's about Lamar and what he does in the biggest moment, right? I love what he said. It's not about the regular season. It's about the playoffs. And he had a great game against Houston, but the next week you get sacked 4 times, throw an interception. One of them's a fumble, sack fumble. And so Lamar has to be better when he plays Kansas City. And yes, the offensive line and receivers, but Lamar has to play better because he's what makes this team go, and he wasn't able to do it when he played Kansas City in the playoffs. So I think it's all about Lamar and him upping his game when it matters most.
And he's talking about the playoffs and just getting to the playoffs being the first step. And I think it's important for people when they look at the Ravens this year to understand there's been a lot of change. The defensive coordinator is now the head coach in Seattle. 2 of his top assistants are now defensive coordinators elsewhere. That's a lot of change for the defense. And then on the offensive side, 3 starters on the offensive line are turning over from last year. So they lost a couple in free agency. They traded Morgan Moses to the Jets. So this is going to be a very young offensive line group. And as these guys know, the way the offseason is structured now, you can't really evaluate offensive line play till July when the pads go on. So they're going to have to get up to speed very, very quickly in order for that offense to function the way it did last year as well.
But to Lamar's point and Tim's, does Week 1 really matter? Kansas City Chiefs lost in Week 1 last year, and look what happened.